Hey team, today we're going to walk through Framer Motion. We're going to use it to add animations and page transitions to make our Rick and Morty wiki app a little bit more interactive. I'm Colby Fayok, and if this is your first time here, make sure you hit subscribe for future updates. Framer Motion is a JavaScript API that allows us to add animations and interactions pretty easily to our apps. Framer Motion is originally from the Framer API, which if you're not familiar, brings the actual Framer app into a JavaScript API. So if you followed along with me before, we created this Rick and Morty character wiki using Next.js. With this, we learned some concepts like fetching data from an API, as well as creating dynamic routes. If you'd rather start off with that walkthrough, I'll have the link in the description. So to get started, the first thing we want to do is actually add the dependencies. So I'm going to go add yarn Framer Motion. And once that's done, we can go ahead and spin back up our development server. So to get started, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to animate this title so that it kind of pops out when the page loads. To do this inside our code, the first thing we want to do is actually import the motion component. Then we're going to scroll down to our title and we're going to actually wrap it with that component. Now on our div, we want to start off by specifying two props. These are going to be our initial and our animate props, which basically tells us what we want it to look like when it first loads and what we want to animate it to. So we're going to name this initial equals hidden and animate equals visible. Next, we're going to set up a variance prop, which is going to be where we actually configure the hidden and the visible properties. I'm going to paste this in, but here we're going to define the hidden, where we're going to keep it at a scale of 0.8 with an opacity of 0. So basically hidden and a little bit smaller. Then we're going to have our visible for when it animates so that it grows to a scale of 1, basically the normal size. And it has an opacity of 1, so it comes back to visibility. And we're just going to delay it 0.4 seconds just to give the page a little time to load before we actually trigger that animation. And if we reload our page, we can see it pop in. So next, let's add some hover effects. So when we hover over Morty or Rick, it actually does something interesting. In our code, we're going to scroll down to grid, and on our LIs, we're going to actually change those to motion.lis. And at this point, if you reload the page, you can see that we're missing some styles there. So it seems like the Motion API doesn't quite work with the class name the same way that the JSX does with Next.js. For our demo purposes, we can scroll down to our style tag and just remove that JSX property. And if we reload our page, we're back to normal. So now with our motion.lis, we're going to add a new prop that's called while hover. This is somewhat similar to the initial and the animate, except this triggers while somebody hovers over the element. So I'm going to paste in these properties, which we're going to scale it up to 1.2, which basically makes it bigger, and we're going to make it last only 0.2 seconds. And if we reload the page and hover over Morty, we can immediately see it grow. Now another issue with that is if you look at the bottom, you can kind of see where it overlaps a little bit weirdly with the one below it. We can fix this pretty easily by adding some more CSS properties, where we have position relative. That way we can add a Z index that's a little bit higher and a background of white. So now if we reload the page and we hover back over, we can no longer see those lines. So the next part is going to be a little bit more interesting. We want to add some page transitions so that when I go to Morty, it's going to do something a little bit more interesting than just load the new page. To do this, we're going to need to create a custom app file with Next.js. That will allow us to wrap our different pages with the motion library. That way we can see those different route changes. So to get started, under pages, we're going to create a new file, and we're going to call that _app.js. I'm going to paste in this code, but essentially what we're doing is we're creating a new component called app, which we're going to take as the arguments the component, which we're just going to pass right along through, as well as the page props, which we'll again just pass along through. Now by doing this, we're not actually really doing anything right this second, but what it does is it allows us to wrap that component with our motion library. So now let's first import that motion library, and then we can go ahead and wrap that component with our motion div. Now similar to before, we're going to add our props. So we're going to say initial, and we're going to call that page initial, and then we're going to add animate and call that page animate. Then we're going to add our variance, where we're going to set up a page initial with an opacity of 0 and a page animate with an opacity of 1. That way, what it's going to essentially do is fade in. And at this point, if you reload the page and try to navigate, it's not actually doing anything. The issue is once that page renders, it's not going to recognize that it's going through the different routes. So we got to tell it to recognize that. So the first thing we want to do is add another argument of router. And with that argument on our motion div, we're going to add a key of router.route. And once we reload the page, we can see that when we go to different routes, it fades from one page to another. Now that we have some of the animations we want, what if we got a little bit more advanced with our animations, such as if we hovered, what if it rotated around a little bit? For this, we're going to use a feature called Keyframes, which allows us to specify a sequence of values that get cycled through as it loops through that animation. So how about on our cards, instead of that 1.2, let's give it this array where we're going to say start at 1, grow to 1.4, and then back to 1.2. And then if we reload the page and hover back over, we can see that it gives a little bit of a bounce. Let's also define a new key called rotate, where we're going to specify another keyframe array, where we're going to say start at 0, rotate over to 10 degrees, back to -10 degrees, and then back to 0. And again, if we reload the page and we hover back over, we can see our effect. So all these animations are great, but we're talking about Rick and Morty here, so let's make it a little bit weird. Another property we have access to is the filter property, which if you're familiar is a CSS property. So if I post this in, we're gonna say rotate the hue, we're gonna start at 0, then rotate it over to 360 degrees, then back to 45 degrees, and finally to 0. And now if we hover over, we can see that it kind of gives a little bit of a color effect, but I still want it a little bit more weird. I'm gonna paste in this updated filter property where we're gonna still have the same hue rotate, but we're also gonna add a contrast of 100% to start off, then we're gonna scale that up to 200%, up to 300%, and then back to 100%, which is normal. Now if we hover over, we can see that the hover effect is even more dynamic. And finally, what if we could spice up a little bit the page transitions? We're gonna use a new component from the motion library called Animate Presence. This allows us to provide animations when components are unmounted from the DOM. So in our app.js file, we're gonna start off by adding that Animate Presence from the import. Next, we're gonna wrap our motion div with that Animate Presence component. This allows us to create a new prop called exit, which we're gonna define as page exit. And inside our configuration, similar to the page initial and page animate, we're gonna define that page exit, which we're gonna set the background color to white, and we're gonna apply a filter of invert, as well as the opacity of 0. So now if we reload the page and we try navigating over, we can see that it inverts the page and it gives us this really weird effect, which is just perfect for our Rick and Morty. So if you followed along with me, you added animations to your Next.js app with Framer Motion. This is a super nice way to add a little bit more interactivity to your static web apps. If you like this video, make sure you hit thumbs up and subscribe for future updates. Thanks for watching.